Will our lives always be separate, or is there really a way to integrate our work lives and our faith lives? That's our topic today on Austin Faith Dialogue. Stay with us.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
For most of us, most of our hours are spent somewhere in the workplace, and sometimes we may feel that our work life and our spiritual lives don't cross at all. But today on Austin Faith Dialogue, we're talking with a couple of people who have done extensive work and extensive teaching in the whole field of workplace spirituality. It's good to have you. John Miner from R.W. Beck Incorporated and Melanie Miner, pastor of Cedar Park United Methodist Church.
Hi, Sandy.
Hi, Sandy.
Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
Now, let's not assume when I throw around the term workplace spirituality or spirituality in the workplace that people necessarily know what we're talking about. So maybe you can describe how to approach this topic?
I'd be happy to. And I would start, I think, just from some of the things that I observe working in a lot of different organizations. And that is a lot of stress. People have difficulty balancing what they call their work life and their personal life, and a growing desire to find more meaning in work and to be seen as whole people in the workplace and not just there to accomplish a specific purpose of the organization. There's also a definition that I think I could read that might be very helpful. This, by the way, is from a book called Spirit at Work by Jay Conger. And his definition, in the truest sense, spirituality gives expression to the being that is in us. It has to do with feelings, with the power that comes from within, with knowing our deepest selves and what is sacred to us. And in contrast to many of the stereotypes that we have about spirituality, somehow being up there or out there or only in church, his belief is that spirituality is really grounded very much in the here and the now. It has a lot to do with being completely human wherever we are. And in many of our organizations, that's a difficult thing to do.
To be fully present, to be fully ourselves, even in the workplace, right?
That's right.
This is an unusual sort of thing to be involved in, perhaps for some folks. Melanie, how did your interest in the intersection of work and spirituality come about?
It was, for me, a very personal thing, Sandy. Several years ago, as I was struggling with my call to the ministry and working in the secular workplace, I just decided I needed to go deeper. I had a hunger to find that center, to see where God was leading me. And for me, of course, it is a very sacred calling. And so I started working with a spiritual director and did some extensive work. And as I went deeper, personally, I found there were a lot of other people who were interested in doing the same. And as I began to share some of those experiences with other people, there are just so many who just get really tuned in and turned on to, I'm so interested in that. I want to explore that for myself. I'd like to have a more meaningful prayer life or a more meaningful spiritual life, and how can I do that? I think that people are really hungry for that, to get in touch with. Of course, for me, that's the sacred, that's God within. But spirituality, really, this whole area doesn't necessarily have to do with any kind of particular religion. It's just people's hunger to find that space within that speaks to them.
And now you're in professional ministry, but John, you're in the secular workplace.
That's right.
So has your journey then toward interest in this topic been different from Melanie's?
Well, it has. I know that we've observed many of the same yearnings for this in the people that we come in contact with. It manifests itself in different ways. in the business organizations with which I consult, spirituality is not typically one of the topics that comes to the table. But when you are in organizations, particularly now, that are struggling to be competitive or to keep good people, more and more the true question arises, what value do I give through my work? And it's not one that's easily answered by individuals or by organizations. So what I find interesting is that when we begin to break the ice about that and people let down some of the guard that they normally have in organizations, the same kinds of comments that Melanie mentioned a moment ago come rushing right out. People really need it, and they are really concerned about having to block that part of their life out just because they're at work.
A real search for meaning, no matter what you're
That's
doing
right.
with your time.
And my personal interest, like Melanie's, is because I've been through some of those struggles, and I still do it on a daily basis. There are parts of my work that I find fulfilling and other parts that I don't, and it is a constant search. What I've found, though, is that the more people I talk to about my own struggles, the more they open up, and the more support there is for all of us who feel those callings and don't quite know what to do with them.
And our work lives compose such a major portion of our life. Our spiritual selves isn't just what we do when we meditate or when we go to church on Sunday, or it's our whole life. It's the workplace too. So, how do we find that in our work?
How do you make it all of a piece?
right.
Well, I know that the two of you from time to time will lead workshops or interest groups or whatever. So can you describe a little bit of what it is you do in these sessions, how you approach the topic, how you introduce things to people?
Well, they all tend to be a little bit different based on the setting and the people who come. But one of the earliest questions that we pose to a group for individual and collective response is, what do you understand spirituality to be? And it's really amazing, I guess, how much confusion there can be about that. And as Melanie mentioned earlier, we try to make a clear distinction between religion and spirituality, because in organizations, religion often ends up being a barrier toward going any further. So we explore that, and in particular we ask people, when was the last time you had an experience at work that felt spiritual to you? And what was it? Explain it, describe it to the group. Invariably, we get some very moving stories told, and mostly it has to do with people paying attention to other people at work as human beings, being sensitive to what they're going through at the time, perhaps some personal crisis they're dealing with that they haven't mentioned, and getting to a new level of communication that isn't normal at the workplace.
And oftentimes, too, people don't see an experience as a spiritual experience until they begin to discuss and hear others describing, and then they recognize, oh, for me that was a particular experience. For me that was a spiritual experience. And so it's also an awakening for them, teaching people to recognize the spirit within.
It sounds sort of like demystifying too, in the sense that the word spirituality perhaps is a large word, perhaps a foreign one in the workplace, right?
We also talk about what are some of the barriers that people encounter in their work life. Everything from there's so much to do and not enough time, I can't sit still long enough to even explore why I'm feeling the way I am. Or we have an organization that is so rigid that certain types of behavior are not permitted. But we then go beyond to explore what might be some ways that individuals could make a difference where they work. And for some, it is simply having a little bit of downtime during the day so that they can reflect upon what's happened and be a little bit more intentional about their behavior toward others and not so wrapped up in getting it done the next minute. For others, it may be creating in their workspace some symbols, reminders of things that take them to a deeper level, visual things objects that remind them of experiences that they've had. Or to the very practical level, there are a number of Spirit at Work groups that are starting up, discussion groups. Some of them are actually going on in the workplace. Many of them take place before at breakfast or after work, where like-minded individuals simply come together and do some of this.
So Spirit at Work then is what, a whole movement?
I think it is.
I think it is too, very much
really
so.
do.
You know, Sandy, it's amazing. In one of our workshops, we were discussing experiences that the participants had had, and one of the participants said, you know, I didn't realize until I had a death in my family, and one of my coworkers came in and sat down, and we started talking, and we went, you know, into more and more meaningful conversation, and we found that we had this whole common area that we got to know each other, and we didn't even realize after working together for years that we could talk at that kind of a level with one another, a much more meaningful, much more in-depth level than we ever had before. And they recognized the spiritual in that conversation. That was just one example of many that.
Do you find in your work with these workshop groups that there's a difference between how men and women approach the whole notion of spirituality and work?
I think that, I think that women are sometimes a little bit more than men as far as their willingness to discuss real personal, real heart issues. I think it's not as common among men to talk like that, but the hunger is there. I think the hunger is equally in men and women. And once that the opportunities arise, and once that the conversation gets started, there's men and women both enter in equally. And I think get as much out of that as just equally.
And you nod, so I get it.
Yeah, I've had similar experiences. I think it's a good thing that there are more women in the workplace, because particularly when you have work groups together or you have a team working together on a very difficult project, the women have a tendency to help the men open up about some of that. And I've had experiences as a consultant where a team, after having gone through a very difficult time, challenging task, came together and realized that no matter how the work product that they were working on ended up, they had reached a new level in their understanding of each other that made the whole effort worthwhile. Statements like, I've been working with you for 20 years, but I really haven't been working with you. I didn't know who you were until we spent this time together on this intense project, and we decided that we were going to give it our all.
And that's ministry. Well, we'll come back for some more conversation here in a minute. Stay with us for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue. We're glad you're here for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue when we're talking about the intersection of our spiritual lives and our work lives with John Miner from R.W. Beck Incorporated and Melanie Miner, pastor of Cedar Park United Methodist Church. Good to have you both again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we talked a little bit about you all leading workshops on the intersection of your work life and your spiritual life. But I wonder if you might be able to describe what, say, a meeting in a workplace might look like as people who are interested in exploring their spiritual lives get together. What happens at one of these?
Well, we think it's important not to overly complicate the process. For most people, it doesn't take a lot other than time to be with others who are thinking the same thoughts, and time to be quiet for a while and listen to what's coming from the inside. So very often after some type of introductory question, maybe just asking how people have been doing, what things have happened in their life that have been really good or difficult, in getting the group together in that sense, we might suggest that they go into some type of a guided meditation where one person in the group could help the others get to a point of sitting still and taking as many of the distractions away and listening to what is inside them.
And that takes the form of just some quiet time and some centering and some breathing and just being aware of your body and your breath and just relaxation and then just some extended quiet time. And it's amazing what will come out of that when people are given an opportunity following that extended quiet time to share, where did their thoughts lead them. And it's amazingly that it's quite often very profound what people will respond, having had that time to center and quiet. And I think people also, when they start going inside and start having that time to just center and get calm and quiet, they find that they're hungry for it more and more. They want more of it, more time to do that.
Of course, with our fast pace at work, one of the challenges with the meditation is for people not to fall asleep, which is not meditation.
But needed, perhaps.
Right.
Well,
right.
and that brings up a related question then. Often at work, we've got our professional selves on. So have you found, working with people attempting to explore their spirituality in their workplaces, that it's better for them to physically stay at the work site or to try to get together with coworkers off-site? What seems to be the most conducive to growth?
It's a mix. And there's I don't think there's any particular formula. Sometimes it's let's get together after work. Sometimes it's let's get together over our lunch hour. Depends on the climate of the workplace, whether it's something that could be done on site during the day or not. It just depends.
For some people, it's not a simple matter of just closing the door to an office. Not everyone has that kind of privacy, and the pace of work in many of our workplaces is not at all conducive unless the organization can make a separate space available and it's okay for people to go there. Some do that, but not many at this point.
Have you found that younger people or older people are more hungry to do this kind of exploration? Or is there a generalization?
Well, I don't think there is. My
don't either.
initial thought was because I had gotten to and past middle age that this is the kind of thing you think about when you get to that age, and that's true. But there's numerous examples of people in the generation that is just now entering the workforce looking for the same things and being much more vocal than we were at the same point in our career. I think that's a good thing. I cite as an example one of the more popular management magazines that's out for that generation called Fast Company. This year, the magazine has had a series of articles on, in this case, work that matters. In previous issues, finding that balance between work and personal life. it's very much on the mind of the readers and writers of these magazines.
A search for meaning, really.
That's right.
It is.
Now, you lifted up one resource. Maybe you all can mention some other resources that would be good to.
We can. Sandy, I think anyone who goes into a bookstore in these days can find hundreds of things anymore on spirituality, and a lot is being written on spirit and work. One of the things I'd like to lift up is this article that we just picked up. I think we got it in the supermarket, didn't we?
Yes.
On the shelf. It's called The Good Life, and the marketing of spirituality is the one of the main articles in here by Susan Collett, and it's an excellent article. She has some very good insights, but I think we're seeing this interest in spirituality everywhere, all over, and we have brought a few things that we could recommend, and we have a couple of
We all
there's
have
a
our favorite
website.
books, you know.
Oh, yes.
And I would mention some by name here that I think can be easily found at libraries or bookstores. Two in particular that I find intriguing, written by an author by the name of John Cowan, who at one point was a member of the clergy but has given that up for the corporate life and for the search for spirituality. One of his books is called The Common Table. Another one is called Small Decencies, Reflections and Meditations on Being Human at Work. Both of these books are made up of short stories from his experience. Another one, Life and Work by James Autry. Reawakening the Spirit in Work by Jack Hawley. The shelves are really full of books like that, and there are many to choose from. I would also like to mention there is an organization that is responding to this need on a national basis. This is called the Center for Spirit at Work. It's located at the University of New Haven in Connecticut and founded by Judith Neal.
And I believe we've got the web address.
The web
Yes.
address,
It should come up here in a minute, but go on.
The website offers many other resources for people who want to explore this path, including some very practical how-to guides on setting up a spiritual group at work, how to run a meeting, a very long bibliography of books and other references that can be used, and interaction. The website also offers an opportunity for you to converse with Judy Neal and some of the other associates who frequent that site on a regular basis.
Okay. This always leads me to wondering, as you've done all this digging and all this work, so what's happened with your lives? What's happened to you two, perhaps together, but certainly individually in your personal lives as you've done this kind of exploration?
Some days, nothing.
Fair
Some days it's back at work and it feels just as stressed and harried as it ever did. But for me, it has made a difference. I have been able to open up dialogue about spirituality with people in my work whom I didn't know were interested in it before. And it's as simple as having a phone call during the day. Either I place it or somebody else does, and we meet each other's need to talk at a different level for a little while. Email has been a very effective way of communicating about our interests, and did you hear about this workshop or that, or another book to read, perhaps? And I think at that level it has helped me to be more intentional about taking some of that personal time almost whenever I need it. I do have a job that allows me some flexibility in time, but interspersed with very strict deadlines. And I find that I'm making the effort to back off when I can so that I have more to give when the heat is really on, and not feeling that I have to run 90 miles an hour all the time.
Sounds like a question of balance. And
For
you?
For me, Sandy, it is a new way for me of looking at life. I am seeing the sacred in the ordinary. I am just being more in tune with the spirit within me. I'm in the everyday things that I do. Just driving in the car, now becomes a time for prayer for me, for getting in touch. I turn the radio off. Just taking a shower in the morning becomes an experience of being alive to the new day and being thankful for that, and taking some meditation time and going within. It's becoming more a way of life and awareness of the world that I didn't have before. And I really have appreciated that, and the hunger is there for more. I have participated in a spiritual growth group that was very enriching for me, and I enjoy that a lot, and hope to do more of that. So it has changed my life. It really has changed my life. Plus, helping me to discern my call to ministry, where God was leading me. I think that can do. Getting in tune with your spiritual self can do that for anyone. Just to help them to discern what they're being called to.
Which leads me to what may be the final question in a couple of minutes we've got left here. So suppose after doing some of this exploration, someone finds that God is indeed calling them to something else, and they're afraid of that. Then what?
Well, and that very question has come out in a number of our workshops. And it's interesting when it does come out how the group responds, because typically within the group we will have people who have not answered it yet. They feel the call or the longing to do something else, and they haven't quite figured out what to do. There are just as likely to be others who said, I listened to it for a long time, but I did it. And I'm here to tell you that if it's with you for that long, and if it's that consistent, it's probably the right thing to do. Not something that you jump into without thinking very carefully about the consequences. But too many people spend too much of their life at work that really does not fulfill them or use their talents. And these calls need to be listened to and acknowledged.
And it may lead to ordained ministry.
It may.
It may lead to secular ministry.
That's right.
But so what you're saying is don't be afraid, right, of wherever this hunger for the spiritual deepening leads you, right?
Yeah. Not only not to be afraid, but to appreciate that you have those kinds of callings in your life. Because if you don't, you might wonder, how alive am I really?
Good question.
And learn to listen. Just learn to listen with an open heart to those callings, and just
We'll do that.
discover where they lead you.
Thank you, Melanie, and thank you,
You're
John,
welcome.
for
Thank you,
helping
Sandy.
us explore where we all need to go. And thank you for joining us this week on Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll see you here again next week.